Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from all over the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 116, featuring Jas Singh, co-founder of Cereblo, which is a Web3 education platform that's using AI to help people better understand the blockchain and increase adoption. And we have rejoining us with the show, Brown Eagle, who's joining us from Calgary. He's the co-founder of Nations First, which is a platform that is focused on empowering Indigenous communities and really looking at ways to improve sustainable development and build businesses and opportunities for Indigenous communities using innovative technology, including crypto. Welcome, Jas and Brown Eagle. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining me. I'm really looking forward to learning about both your new projects. And Brown Eagle, it's always a pleasure to reconnect. I know you've been in these Web3 crypto streets, kind of pushing the charge for Indigenous representation and for really empowering Indigenous communities and Indigenous people and sustainable development, which is closely related to that as well. So really just inspired by what you continue to do, and happy to reconnect with you and really chat through, what you're building now and what you're working with Jas on to try to improve education education and improve awareness and improve adoption among Indigenous people and really, I think, Canadians broadly and people around the world. So with that, thank you again for joining us, everyone. My name is David Chroma, go by Chrome in the metaverse. And as you can suspect, today we're really going to be looking at the topic of sustainable development, Indigenous education, and empowerment through crypto technology, as well as the topic of AI in crypto, and specifically using AI to actually improve adoption and improve understanding of crypto. I think that a lot of the times when we're looking at AI in the crypto context, at least from my perspective, there's a bunch of AI trading bots that are becoming very popular and helping people, make some money on the back end using AI to just make trades without even having to look at it. And then there's also, of course, the AI art conversation and the idea that people are making pretty impressive art using AI, at least partially or sometimes fully just all AI. Shout out to TP. She makes amazing art using AI, for example.
Yeah,
so those two pieces are kind of the big things that we've seen as far as the most hype is around those kind of two use cases for AI. However, I think that the conversation around education and adoption, and of course everyone knows, there's LLMs, you can go to ChatGPT and probably learn a whole bunch about Web3 and crypto. That's cool, but to actually, zone in or zero in on people that are kind of less likely to even just be aware of the technology and, how can AI make their journey a little bit shorter? How can AI make their journey a little bit easier, which seems to be what Cereblow is kind of focusing on. And I know they've offered a really cool kind of offer specifically to Indigenous students, saying that this kind of education will be free on their platform, in partnership with Nations First. So just kudos to both of you for what you're doing, and really looking forward to jumping into it and getting a better understanding and maybe even hearing how we can support what you're doing. I will also add, it's awesome that all three of us are here in Canada. I do love to talk to people from all over the world, but it is more rare that I'm able to speak to fellow Canadians, and Jas even lives over in Manitoba with me, and I know Brown Eagle's from Winnipeg as well, a fellow Manitoban, so really cool to connect with some local people focused on innovating, focused on building, as we are here in Manitoba as well. So just really grateful for that. With all of that, maybe before we really jump into kind of the two platforms and projects that you're working on, Jas, I'll start with you. I'd really love to just get a bit of a sense of kind of your background, what brought you to crypto, what brought you to this kind of idea around, using AI to help educate Web3 leaders. I have the website up right now. It says empowering the next generation of Web3 leaders. So that's a very cool, ambitious kind of goal for your platform. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and background and what brought you to Web3. And thanks for joining us.
Sure. So thank you for having me here again, David. So my background is I'm a tech entrepreneur, done computer science as my profession, founded multiple companies. Two of them got acquired over the last 8 years. Have done InsurTech, Web3 technology. My last startup was crypto insurance. And right now what I'm doing is we're building on the Solana network. We're doing low latency middleware for the Solana blockchain, and we run a validator. We have a decent amount of stake with us, and it's a Canadian company as well. So, bringing Canada forward, forefront of innovation all throughout. My engagement with Cereblow and how I came to this thought was recently came to Canada. When you go to Manitoba, you are just shown this contrast, right, that exists where the Indigenous people, they've not gotten the right sort of education, and sometimes it seems that it's a structural problem, that there's a lot of funding that's going, but somehow it's not making it to them. And while you see that happen, you can't just sit by and do nothing. That's not the kind of person that I am, right? So I've written like multiple research papers on artificial intelligence, been professionally trained in that as well. So I thought, how can AI make or bridge the gap, right? Because there exists a gap. There's the Indigenous people and the skill set that an average Indigenous guy has, and then there's the rest of the population. We need to acknowledge that the gap exists, and we need to make sure that we don't just cover this gap, we make the Indigenous people go much beyond it, so that they're able to champion for their rights, they're able to do much more in the wider economy. That's how truly we can make reconciliation happen. And Brown does not want me to use this word, but I like it. I like to use it because I'm using it the right way, right? Reconciliation can only happen with education and giving the right tools. So in my experience, I realized that there are a lot of Web3 opportunities that are available. People can become DAO delegates, can get paid, etc. This course allows people to learn artificial intelligence tools. So AI prompt engineering. How do you actually prompt ChatGPT to get what you want? It's a skill, and it's an acquired skill. So there's a module for that, and then there's modules about how can you actually learn about Web3 practically. So how multi-sigs work, how you can set up your own wallet, how can you become a financial treasurer for an on-chain company, how you can basically use AI to do marketing for your crypto startup, right? It's basically a lot of stuff, non-technical in nature. You don't need to learn how to write smart contracts, but how you can use AI to deploy things and all of that. So it's not like using AI to trade to make money. It's using AI to do productive stuff, which you get paid for, right? So my thesis is, if we can get any indigenous person who comes to us for free, we can get them to a level where they're trained very well, like top 80 percentile AI or Web3 guy. We've bridged the gap. Not just that, we've like gone much more beyond it, right? And that's me doing my part, right? The country has been so nice to me, and if I can't do something for the original inhabitants, then I'm not giving back, right? So that's my story.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. How long have you been in Canada for, Jas?
8 months.
Oh shit! Look at this guy. All right, good for you, man. As somebody born and raised here, I think Brown Eagle would agree that that's nice to hear. Somebody who's come in and hasn't been here that long and is already kind of focused on the mission of whatever you want to call it. Better understanding, forward progress. Reconciliation is a buzzword that I will agree has been maybe misused by some, and can be applied in not a huge way, in not a realistic way, or maybe not a sincere way. That's the word I'm looking for. So Brown Eagle, let me hear from you a little bit of an update, man. How are things going? What have you been up to since we last talked? How is the nation's first platform kind of an evolution of what we discussed during our last episode?
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having us, and I really appreciate that. So it's definitely an honor to be able to share what we're doing. But yeah, I've been steady building a huge community relationship person to be able to bring that awareness and the technology, the education to the people. So I've been working along really closely with the individuals, the nations, project managers, anybody that's really into like resources, in-ground assets, right? So I do a lot of education on tokenization, and really try to create mental models for people to be able to get approached appropriately in the space, rather than coming in here with a narrative of, it's just crypto, quick making money, and then, there's just a bitter conversation. It's a bitter taste. So me providing the real mental model of like, hey, it's not just about money, it's actually about freedom, and be able to enhance operational efficiencies by solutionizing with less friction or automation, right? But how do you say that in less technical terms, right? That's where I guess the fadeness of the attraction that happens. So what I do is, especially as an indigenous entrepreneur, to be able to bring these conversations to the people. How could we be able to help the community? What are your gaps? And a lot of these communities, and unfortunately my people, like, they're still sticks and stones, if you will, right? And to be able to get them to understand the gaps that they're currently in, I think that's where I could bring a lot of value, to be able to say, hey, us indigenous people, we have a pedal to push now. We're able to remove ourselves from government dependencies, and to be able to bring financial and digital literacy into this, but also learn and lead in this space. So I've been doing that a lot with the educational component of it. Jumping on with the Nation's First team to be able to bring the relationship building, the community aspect to it. I think that brings a lot of value to be able to understand how to relay this type of technology. It could be really confusing, right? So sure. To be able to understand, absolutely, to be able to understand, like, the community levels at a certain point, from an individual to from voting mechanisms to communication mechanisms, that we're able to help out, enhance, and be able to bridge those gaps in those communities is where I come into play. And I find them healthy challenges, to be honest, because this is something that we're able to jump on and to be able to like lead on our own, rather than having a consumer mindset, more of an ownership mindset. So that's something I really bring to the table.
Turning from consumers to owners, and maybe from reliance to independence, right? And sovereignty, as we love to say, is a key word in Web3 and crypto, right? It's all about being self-sovereign, but also using that sovereignty to find new opportunities and create new opportunities and allow for others to support your endeavors, really. That's the beauty of what's possible. So looking at your site, Nations First, it says advancing indigenous self-determination and nature-based economies. And then you mentioned kind of in passing the idea of tokenizing in-ground assets, which I think is a huge interesting kind of untapped market. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, but specifically on the self-determination piece, right? And like you say, there is, whether it's reliance or just kind of stuck in the cycle of being used to, basically not complaining, but advocating to the government for what you are owed, essentially, right? And now being able to somehow take a turn towards a more self-deterministic route using crypto, using technology more broadly, AI as well. How do you see that kind of happening? And like you say, when you bring up crypto, it does tend to, leave people kind of distracted, or they get a bad taste in their mouth because they think about the, all the worst FUD that you hear out there, right? So what is that conversation actually looking like? And how far along, if at all, would you say that indigenous communities, even if there's just one shining example in Canada, how far along are they towards kind of taking that self-determination route?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really dear question to me. Thank you for asking that. So, we wanted to build something that doesn't enhance or optimize current systems, which is obviously something that doesn't really align with our people, right? Such as the Indian Act, right? We have to go through so many layers of government. We have to go through so many layers of bureaucratic process and applications that which we don't understand. And there's so much approval for it, so many, and the time consuming. And what the Indian Act really states is that we're not able to trade with each other. We're not able to extract or be a self-sustainable economy, right? With blockchain and cryptocurrency, tokenization changes the dynamics a lot, right? And so we're able to open up these new vehicles and put ourselves in secondary markets through tokenization, right? So we have a lot of land and we have a lot of resources, but we're not able to extract that in any way to be able to trade with other nations. But what blockchain is, we're able to create a digital twin through tokenization. But each token is like a fingerprint, right? You can't duplicate it, right? And it's all on the blockchain, full of transparency. So how this changes the dynamics is that we don't need to go through the Indian Act, nor do we need government layers of applications to be able to get the approval. We already know how many assets that we have on chain, and then we're able to go through protocols with other nations through DAOs. It's a decentralized autonomous organization, a consensus mechanism tool to be able to work with each other to understand what resources do we need, how could we help through voting power, even communication. This changes the dynamics not just for resources, but for murder and missing Indigenous women, to be able to hold mining extract companies accountable, maybe even hold our own leadership accountable, right? So there's changes the dynamics in many, many different ways. And crypto doesn't have to be a bitter taste. I always think about tokenization in crypto, like when you go to Home Depot and you see bolts and you see screws and you see nuts, and it represents totally different things for totally different aspects. And it's going to be for totally different people, right? That's the way crypto is going to be. And the landscape when it's coming, especially with the new adoption that's happening, this is where Cereblo and I come into the educational piece to say, hey, like there's a pedal to push here for you able to learn this type of technology for as an ownership to be able to create decisions on your own, to be able to have a voting mechanism and to be able to put the right leadership on board, or to be able to hold even simple use cases for everyday life, right? So I think crypto or blockchain is really analyzed, to be honest. It's just to be able to lessen the friction, put in more automation with transparency. That's pretty much basically right there.
Yeah, and accountability as well, right? And being able to know exactly where the money's come from, where it's going, all that good stuff. Yeah, that's really exciting, man. That's awesome. Congrats. So turning it back to Cereblo, I have a lot of questions about the DAO and all that as well, but we'll get to that. It can get pretty wonky. So when looking at kind of what Cereblo's offering and the idea of kind of providing this new education to Indigenous people specifically, but also people more broadly, can you speak to that, Jas, as far as like what is the actual offer? Like what's the 1, 2, 3 steps that, you know, your average student that is, you know, jumping onto your platform will kind of go through? And you mentioned, you know, you don't get too technical. It's not about being able to write your own smart contract or necessarily like, you know, build a blockchain from scratch, although the coding is out there for anyone to be able to do it if you want to. But is it like theoretical? Is it a lot of like, there's a new creator economy growing on the blockchain and here's how you can take advantage and that kind of stuff? Or what angle are you really taking? And then if you could speak to how AI is helping as well, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I'll give you not the understanding of what the course offers, but the understanding of where I want a prospective student to be placed at, right? So what I realized in the last protocol that I did was we turned it into a DAO, but the thing is there were no delegates. So there were assets under management, right? Millions of dollars, but there were no delegates to take over and actually, you know, participate in the DAO. So this is a situation which a lot of protocols go through during the bear market, where you've actually not set up an LLC, right? It's not a private company, or you might have a private company in theory, right? Like a license or something, but you don't have an LLC at this point of time. Like you're not setting it up as a private company. You want it to be a decentralized organization. A key component of that is people who are competent should be participating in the decision-making process and taking things forward, right? So what we did was we identified key groups that a DAO needs to survive, right? So a DAO needs a treasurer, somebody who's on the multi-sig approving payments. A DAO needs a technical guy, CTO kind of a guy, who's actually writing the code. You need a business development guy who's selling the services that the DAO provides. And then you obviously need a marketing function, right? So these are functions, but they can be done by one person, they can be done by 3 different persons, depends on the budget, right? So this is who we are training for, right? So you get a bunch of modules, and based on what you want to be trained for, right, you can choose the position that you're aiming for in DAOs, right? You're then suggested a few modules, right? And you can then take up the course. So the list of modules are, you have DAO fundamentals, you can take up the technical skills. So this is the technical module. If somebody actually wants to understand how to deploy smart contracts, use artificial intelligence to write smart contracts, audit them, try to understand where the attack vectors exist, right? And then you have a community building, you know, module where you basically learn how do you actually manage a Telegram community, what sort of permissions you need, all very practical use cases, right? Everything that I've learned doing these multiple protocols in the past has been diluted into this. Like, how do you manage, run a protocol, and then how do you decentralize that function, right? And then you have risk management, which is you have treasury. Now, how do you deploy the treasury into various DeFi protocols? Doesn't need code like you to learn how to code, but you need to understand what is actually happening in the DeFi protocol. Took USDC out of my treasury, I'm deploying it or depositing it as collateral in our way. Which risk bucket should I deploy it in? If I'm using Morpho, then which risk bucket should I deploy it in? What assets to borrow against and then deploy somewhere else, right? So how do you generate good amount of risk-adjusted returns? And then you have marketing strategy, right? How do you actually do a Twitter strategy to grow your audience? And then advanced operations such as, you know, prompt engineering, AI prompt engineering to get aid in everything. So I actually think everybody should be taking the prompt engineering module irrespective of what they want to do, because it's like a force multiplier, right? So you take the prompt engineering. If you want to be a marketer, helps you there. You want to write code, helps you there. Whatever you want to do, you just, if you're going to use 8 chat GPT prompts, you're going to use up your limit, right? We're going to let you do it in a single one, right? Because you're exactly telling the LLM, bro, get me this, get me this, get me this, get me this, right? Same thing as we learn in management schools. If you're actually managing a person, one of the key things is to learn how do you ask the right stuff. So before that, you need to know what you're looking for, right? So that's what you get taught in prompt engineering.
So it's a lot of prompt support, a lot of really trying to lean on the idea that AI is a very useful asset, a very useful kind of support tool. So from what I gather, it doesn't get too theoretical. And how important do you think it is to kind of give a really fundamental breakdown of like, this is Satoshi's white paper and this is why crypto exists and here's the high level benefits of adopting crypto? Do you kind of get into that, or you really just kind of jump into like how to get a protocol up and running, how to get a kind of whatever smart contract or NFTs collection kind of up and running, building the Telegram, building your community, whether it's Telegram or Discord. So it sounds like it's a lot more kind of angled towards almost like the end result, like like, do you know what you want to build? And we're going to teach you how to use AI to build that.
Correct. It's just to answer your question. I think Satoshi's vision means different things for different people, right? So I used to I was the CTO of the third largest health insurer in Dubai. And for me, Satoshi's vision basically means that, okay, if a certain person is lodging a claim and it gets rejected, the guy actually knows what caused the rejection, right? And this, like, we Canadians might not understand this, but like it's a big thing in the US, right? Where they're like 66% of pre-approvals or something get done. Like you need to do a pre-approval when you go to a clinic. We don't know it, but like you give your insurance card, they run the claim, a mock claim through, and then it gets rejected. Now you don't even know why it got rejected, right? Because they don't want you to know, because then you'll optimize your query the next time to make sure that it gets, like they don't want you to know the algorithm which rejected you. So for me, when I came into the space, Satoshi's vision meant that, right? So for everyone, it means different things. So we can't really teach it. Like it has to be learned through going through the white paper, right? So if you think about any industry's adoption, the way it goes forward is that some people come there for money, right? So in our case, I think we've reached that point where people would want to get employed in the industry, and where the course helps them go there, right? But while they're employed, they would go themselves and read the Satoshi white paper, right, to understand what it means for them. So I don't want to pop the cherry for them on Satoshi, because it's very personal, right? Different people come to the Satoshi conclusion in different parts of their life, right, or their career, right? So it means different things for different people, but the course is aligned. Either you want to launch your own project, or you want to be a delegate in somebody else's project. How do you get there? That's what it gets you to do. And that's how education is traditionally done, right? Like point to point, right? University trains you to get employed, right? Or to be a business owner, whatever, right? Like you get trained for that. And that's what it means. You get trained to be
definitely valuable for sure, to be able to basically get the tools you need to create that end product that you want to create. So bringing it back to nations first, right? And the idea that, like you say, having the conversations, I think that people will get to a place where they can use Sarah Blow's course to launch a specific project after there are some kind of foundational theoretical conversations that take place, right, Brown Eagle? And looking at your site, kind of looking at the DAO section, and the concept of kind of building your own community out from scratch, I feel like proposing that easily gets lost in the weeds if you don't have a kind of very simple, kind of fundamental answer to the question why, right? Like, why should we use DAOs? So how are you kind of addressing that question, and what does it look like when you basically bring this kind of nations first concept to an indigenous community, which I know you've been doing quite a bit of over the last few years? What does your conversation look like, that first initial intro conversation? And how do you think, like, is it working well, or do you feel like there's still kind of a fuzzy kind of layer to kind of get through that's really difficult? Like, is there a message that you've realized works every time, or is it really just shoot your shot and hope for the best kind of situation. How are you addressing that?
For sure, for sure. So, well, what I've been doing is, just supporting those conversations with the nations. A lot of even my own community still using pen and paper for voting mechanisms, right? What's great about DAO is DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. And what a DAO is, it's all three of them, right? It's an organization where everybody runs as one unit, and it's decentralized because not one person or the group can have full control. It's autonomous because it doesn't need outside things. It doesn't need to rely on outside things like third-party validation. So it's a really cool consensus mechanism where everybody comes together. Now, if you put this type of model into the First Nation communities through voting mechanisms, through leadership, no more appointees by actually real voting, to be able to have asset allocations, to be able to have a membership accountability, to be able to bring the people back to the people back to the land, but also operate as delegators, community builders. And so what this could really do is help out the First Nations communities through resource management, businesses. If there's Indigenous businesses that are trying to get into the corporate world or to the entrepreneurial world, we don't have friends and family around. We don't really expect a VC coming towards us because it's 0.02% of VC funding is going to Indigenous businesses, right? So what we are able to do is tokenize their businesses and put them in these secondary markets like a decentralized exchange and be able to create that fluidity. So they have the tokens that represent that business, they believe in it, and that liquidity can go into the tokens, liquidate it, and put it back into the business, whatever budgeting, they need to hire people, marketing, or to scale, right? So there's different dynamics to it, there's different approaches to it. But where I'm coming from is like, voting mechanisms to be able to help a lot of the First Nations to hold their members accountable for better leadership, to be able to put laws into updated laws and policies up to date, and to be able to have that transparent communication, right? So what DAOs can really solve a lot of problems that I think the nations haven't have a clear view of what is there to solve yet, right? First, we need to identify the problems, how we're able to solve it, and then what are the milestones and thresholds to be able to put those protocols in place to be able to be a sustainable economy.
Amazing. And I do think the concept of on-chain voting is one that continues to come up, especially when I'm talking to your just average people that are not necessarily, diehard Web3 advocates. I think they see the value in having on guaranteed, accountable, transparent, authentic counting of every vote. The better we can understand our voting process and not question things after the fact, I think that's better for everybody involved, right? And so I think that, would that be a case study, for example, where Cereblo would actually be able to say, okay, community X wants to adopt an on-chain voting mechanism that is accountable, reliable, but maybe it has a point of centralization being, whether it's the tribal council or, whatever the case might be, there may be a kind of authority that does need to have line of sight, as well as just, I guess, I don't know, maybe there has to be small changes or something. So that's a very good use case, right? So is that something you can bring to Cereblo and be like, all right, here's how we would look at that, and this is how you can potentially roll it out? Or is that more of a nuanced kind of micro project that wouldn't really fit into Cereblo's education?
No, absolutely. I think education, the awareness and education is really, really key, right? So the more minds that we have, the more contributors we have, the more people that are able to put more into the space to be able to contribute more, the better, right? We're a singular unit. We're supposed to be running as a singular unit, right? And if we're able to have a consensus with each other, I think we're able to thrive in a better way. And especially with your education, bringing awareness, and allowing them to be able to operate with their own innovative ideas, be able to solutionize their own problems. I think it's just, bringing that awareness in a very high, simple way, and how we can be able to help them through education. I think we definitely could have a pedal to push here to be able to get everybody onboarded, as much as people we would like to, that are interested in this. And it's really a hands-on approach too. It's not something that, hey, you learn something, good luck, have fun, right? We do have the consistent support vehicles to be able to support you on your Web3 journey, right?
That's pretty cool for sure. And yeah, Jas, so like DAO creation or on-chain voting, these is things that the educational course can definitely get into, kind of, I guess, at a more granular level, right? Like it's one thing, you know, conceptually, everything that Brown Eagle just said is amazing.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to the rubber hitting the road, right, and actually rolling out an on-chain voting solution that everybody trusts and everybody understands to some degree, that it's reliable and trustworthy, like, is Cerebro able to kind of pull together a solution like that?
So, full disclosure, I should have done this earlier. I'm an investor and advisor in Nations First, so I'm not shilling them. But Nations First has a on-chain voting mechanism, and that can be easily deployed as like one-click DAO creation. But because we don't want to be biased in the course, we teach multiple methods of DAO creations, right? So they're all no code, so you can do it on snapshot. That's what most of the protocols use, where you can set up, okay, this is the token address, and this is the weight of each token. You can even have multiple tokens, different weights for each token for the voting. So it's been like, it's part of community management. How do you explain to the community, how is this voting system transparent, and then how do you set it up? They're very practical use cases, and the way Cerebro and Nations First work together with this is that Nations First goes to a nation, explains them, tokenization of X natural resource that is under your jurisdiction can be done on chain. We can help you raise funds, etc., etc. However, the management of these resources also needs to be done on chain. So you will have to delegate one person from your side to be the treasurer on chain. Then we need to explain to that person. Cerebro comes in, explains to that person using the course and modules. But you're going to be the treasurer. How do you use the multisig? How do you make sure your seed phrases are safe? How do you create separate copies of it? What are the recovery methods, if any, that you can implement for this? So this is how education and implementation go hand in hand in those practical use cases.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, and I can see how there's simple kind of, like you say, one-click DAOs, and then there's more kind of nuanced, technical kind of, I guess, entire organizations that need to be brought on chain, which can get a little bit more complicated than your average kind of snapshot DAO. But yeah, definitely very cool. So looking at kind of the DAO concept, right? Because I feel like when you go to somebody and say, you know, a decentralized autonomous organization is great for this reason, that reason, that reason, a lot of the times their eyes will just glaze over before you even really like finish the pitch, right? And so when looking at kind of basically what you're doing is creating an on-chain structure for the community that already exists, right? And I wonder if the DAO language is more of a hindrance than a help, you know, when it comes to kind of spreading this education. I mean, I like it because I'm a crypto junkie. Like, I understand the value of decentralization and the fact that that is so core to what makes this technology so useful. But I wonder if, you know, just saying, bring, you know, your community on chain so that you can have transparent accounting, so that you can have on chain voting where there's no questions asked about the results. And looking at the kind of tokenomics of it as well, if I'm not mistaken, you would basically have to have kind of like a utility token that can be used to generate liquidity, generate investment in the community, allow for outsiders to actually buy into the community in their own way, and then a governance token where only community members actually get access to that token, right? Or some way to kind of put a level above your average person who's, you know, maybe buying the utility token or whatever, and the actual voters, you know, and the people who should have say in, you know, what happens to their local community, right, and their council. So how will that work? And I feel like the tokenomics of it, to build it out reliably, I'm not sure if a one-click DAO is going to be able to do that, but I'd love to be proved wrong. So I don't know, Brown Eagle, like, how are you kind of pitching that, and what are the tokenomics that work best? Is there a use case already rolled out, or is it still very much in the early stages? Sorry, just throwing a lot of questions at you there.
No, absolutely, for sure. So our DAO Launchpad is already completed. It's ready to go. What we're doing is trying to validate, you know, templates to be able to understand, okay, what what are the complexities of your business and how we're able to do that, especially with like mining mineral companies, asset manager companies. But from a community perspective, in my opinion, in my approach, the way the tokenomics would work is, user-based roles, right? How much of your token, how much weight does it carry? Community tokens, votes, you can just really have to separate them through smart contracts, right? So you would have your leadership governance token, you would have your community-based role tokens, and each of them were able to have an access to a certain point or a certain threshold of, maybe it could be delegation, treasury management systems, voting, to be able to validate transactions, anything that really aligns with the community or with the mission of the importance of that community for sustainability. That would be my approach, is to have distinctions of which token represents which, and to be able to understand multi-signature wallets, to understand how that works with that ecosystem. But yeah, it doesn't really have to be too complicated. It's just levels of different tokens with different user of different accessibility of their role. Right. And then it's all done on a blockchain, and then certain multi-signatories are able to approve that, and obviously incentivize them for their contribution to the DAO.
Mm-hmm. And is there any concern around the idea of kind of random outsiders who are obviously very well funded, the whale enigma, where they come in with their, $1 million and they dump it in the DAO, they get a bunch of the token and everyone's happy, they got liquid, but then 2 months later that token goes up 3 times or whatever, and that person decides to take their gains, and when they do so, the whole kind of value potentially becomes very volatile and kind of dumps, right? And I know that's part of crypto, but is there concern from kind of a governance perspective around having that level of volatility, and how are you solving for that, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, from my perspective, would be private chains, subnets, and then to a certain market with certain people that hold in that token, and to be able to put those right protocols to be able to recognize anybody from outside that community, to be able to come in and snipe or be able to whale those tokens and throw off the algorithm or any of the tokenomics, right? Mm-hmm. That would be my perspective. But on a more technical or compliance way, I'm sure there, with blockchain law, with jurisdiction, there's going to be some protocols and compliance put in place to be able to avoid situations like that. Especially with the communities that are able to approve people that come into the ecosystem with subnets. I'm sure that we're able to incentivize people to find the right leadership in those roles to be able to, safeguard those environments.
Cool.
Yeah, just wanted to jump in here as well. So I think this problem has been tackled on chain already up to a certain point. So what you're describing is a DAO governance attack, right? Where sometimes what happens is the native token, which is guarding the treasury, which allows you to vote on the DAO, is valued less than the assets of the treasury. So somebody would potentially accumulate the native token, and then they would basically take the money out of the treasury. So it's a classic DAO attack, and it's an identified point of attack. The way we've been able to, in the crypto world, guard against those attacks is we have something called a vote escrow token. So you take your native token, and then you have to vote escrow it in order to be able to vote with it. So what you do is if you take one token, you vote escrow it for 4 years, it's equal to 4 tokens, right? And if somebody has a single token and vote escrows for a year, which means it's locked for a year, it's 1 token. So the votes are much more weighted towards the person who's taking longer, along with the number of assets that they have, right? So it's basically the people who are long-term locked in the ecosystem are the ones who will get more voting power, right? That's one way to solve the problem. The second way is you can also, this is what the delegate problem is. So you don't have enough smart people in the DAO who people can delegate their voting power to for a short period of time, who they think can make decisions for them using their voting power. And then this is how Futurarchy and all of those other I would say systems on Solana also work, where you delegate your voting power to somebody else who you think makes more sense. And this is how we manage it with completely permissionless systems. So what Brown is talking about is, in the case of indigenous, you have these allow lists or white lists, where based on digital identity, which Nations First has, you can basically know, okay, who's from the community, who's not from the community. So you can't have whale attacks, but they're essentially still public blockchains. You can see what is happening. So you're not giving away transparency, but you're not taking, like, just making it all public and exposing it to attacks, right?
Yeah.
Nascent communities and all of that. So this is how I would say, like, completely permissionless systems versus not so permissionless systems, like how you can bridge the gap between the both of them. And you need complete permissionlessness over the long term to get a lot of liquidity coming in, because
that's what makes it
basically
reliable, right? It makes it gets the investors in, because they see that there's a real tokenomic structure, and they know that it's not, it's a real deal, right? Yeah, I mean, after talking this through, honestly, as somebody who's, I will admit, a little bit jaded on the concept of DAOs right now, I've been in quite a few, and to varying levels of success. Most recently, shout out to Jupiter. I don't know if you're a fan of the Jupiter ecosystem over there in Solana. They just had an airdrop for people who had been locking in their DAO, which I had been, thankfully. Shout out to Grayson. He's the one who put me in on the loop on that one about a year and a half ago or so. So that was nice, a little bit of payout for taking part in their ecosystem. But overall, I think that there's always this risk, like you were just saying, and like you were saying with your own protocol that you were on there, Jas, where, if you don't have active delegates at all, who are actually paying attention and care about the overall governance, the whole thing just falls apart right away, right? It's like there's nothing you can do if you don't have the bodies, or you don't have the people that are actually putting in the effort. So that's the biggest problem I've seen. And then there's the centralization question, right? Where, okay, so you've got a handful of delegates that genuinely care about it, they're passionate about it, but in the end, they're speaking for however many hundreds or even thousands of people, but they're like 6 people, or maybe they're 20 people, or whatever the case might be. But they end up having a very oversized influence over the entire organization. And in some cases, they were elected to those positions. And in that case, you could argue that's a much more kind of decentralized model. But I think from my experience, most of them are just the people that helped build it in the first place, and they're the ones who still care about it. And everyone else is kind of pieced out, and now they're there kind of plugging away and trying to push things forward. And mad credit to them, and not knocking it at all, because I see the vision and I understand why. And I've had this conversation with other guests as well on the show. So I'm just curious, when I look at it in the context of indigenous sovereignty, when I look at it in the context of reserve governance, and the problems that we've seen when it comes to not getting the fair compensation from the federal government, or having all kinds of crazy roadblocks and regulatory hurdles to jump over just to develop on your own land, it's a really cool use case, and I see it how it could work. And it will be great to finally have like a specific community that we can point to where it is actually being rolled out in an effective way, and where that kind of on-chain governance structure, whatever that looks like, if it's a full-on DAO, awesome. But I think there's also a space where some kind of middle ground, right, where you have the actual real-world governance adopting certain elements of on-chain accountability and transparency. Maybe it's just in the budget, maybe it's in the on-chain voting, so that everyone is comfortable with the voting outcome. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the final solution is, but I do feel like a kind of cookie cutter approach would be required, and that like really diving into the full board DAO can overwhelm people. But I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if either of you have any follow up on that concept, but the DAO is just such a fascinating topic, and it does have so much potential. I've just seen it so far being unfortunately not lived up to its potential. So
Absolutely. And I think even like just the most minimum applications through DAOs, just to see how things going, because some of them won't even realize like they're utilizing DAOs, just removing the friction, bringing more automation, right? And the more convenience, less button pushing. But yeah, like if you could start with the most minimum application for the use case, start it there and then scale from there, I think you can have a really good use case and a very optimistic mindset.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. That's a good call. So I don't want to miss the in-ground assets conversation and the idea of tokenizing real-world assets as we start to wind down here. Really just want to get a sense of, what is that looking like? Because to your point, there is a whole lot of assets in the ground, whether it's gold, whether it's lithium, whether it's natural gas, whether it's oil, dotted across all of these reserves across Canada. And I just think it would be such a fascinating idea to be able to actually tap into that, value essentially that is in the earth, knowing that it will be, sourced at some point in the future, or maybe in some cases it won't be, and it still, has real world value just knowing that it's there, right? So how are you kind of tackling the RWA conversation, as it were, real world assets being tokenized? It's a popular conversation in the kind of big industrial levels of investment right now. BlackRock's always talking about it, and a lot of those kind of higher level investment people. That's where this technology is going. Like, assets will be tokenized. It's not a question of whether they will be, it's just when they will be and how commonplace it becomes, So how is Nations First tackling the in-ground assets tokenization?
Absolutely. So we've been really knocking on some doors, and our doors being knocked on too with mining exploration companies, asset managers, people that are in carbon credits, diversity bio credits, to be able to understand. We're just giving them the awareness and what we can bring to the table. Just kind of passing the ball back and forth, understanding where's their friction. But what we do is, we're creating literally a digital twin of the land. It could be water, it could be a tree, right? We're literally creating a digital twin, but obviously backed by a 43101, a geologist, be able to get all the right accurate data to pinpoint, right? So instead of them getting, like going through, certain phone calls to be able to get the certain data, to be able to get through regulations and all these layers of approval and applications. Like what tokenization is able to do is, like, why can't you just have everything in one singular unit of a data center to be able to see the templates or the data that you need to see to proceed your project or to proceed any other resource asset management, and to be able to have, full control, full transparency. It takes away time consumption, and it takes away like a cost effective, right? And the data structure is a lot more accurate than something like on a piece of paper, right? So this really changes the dynamic for mining companies, for nonprofits, and to be able to create also back to DAOs, through DAOs, to be able to have that liquidity, right? So to be able to have like a DAO linked with a governance token, I'm probably getting too deep here, but to a liquidity pool, create that. And what the whole point is to create rewards on your current asset, right? And to be able to try do that through DAOs and tokenizations, I think that would be the approach. With my model for these nations, or for the companies, for the NGOs, and it brings a lot more transparency and like finance allocation, voting, to be able to get this the project up to speed, up to par, but also to be able to address any type of operational efficiencies from resources, from communication, or just hierarchy models. I think where there would be the approach from my perspective with tokenization.
Cool. That's awesome. I like how you're talking about how you do kind of require experts, right, to kind of assess the land and assess the value, and you go through all of that first, and then it's a matter of kind of taking that data and getting some kind of agreement. Like, do you foresee like some kind of body that actually recognizes the tokenization of these assets? Or like, I just wonder if it's enough to say, a geologist says there's X amount of this resource in the ground, this worth this amount of money. Ipso facto, we have tokens now based on this value that we, break down and have a limited amount of, and, it's for sale, and whoever gets them first, will be able to, see the value out of that long term as maybe we start mining it and we start paying back into the token. I just wonder, like, without maybe it could be the government. I don't think that's the best option. But I feel like there has to be some kind of central body that acknowledges the legitimacy of these tokenized assets. Otherwise, you'll have competing tokenizations of the same asset. And how do you foresee that kind of evolving?
Yeah, like we would like need the data from like the current structures, the current people that we're approaching, or who we're approaching as the companies. We would just need their end of their data, long as it's up to compliance, right? Long as it's up to updated protocols, everything's up to any way from regulations to policy on their end. And then we're able to proceed whatever the data that we have on their end that is accurate, up to par, also compliant. that we could do it in a transparent way and an authoritative way that both sides are, both sides are on a legal aspect that's being met, right?
Nice.
What I would think is like when we go to these communities or these mining companies, that's where the conversation would immediately go to. Like, where's your data? Where's your operation efficiency? How could we organize this? Where can we be able to bring automation and less friction onto that certain aspect, tokenize that, and be able to have that less friction automation? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense that that's what they would want. And I guess what I'm hearing is that there is already kind of a mechanism through just being compliant, obviously, with the government, and maybe having some other type of third party that acknowledges minerals, for example, have them kind of accredit your project and kind of accredit your tokens. And then from there, they're not going to accredit any other tokens for those specific resources, right? And so it's just a matter of, like you say, being compliant. And honestly, I think the whole compliance conversation, I know it's not super engaging or, not everybody's going to love it, but it is very important. And I think that with, what's happening stateside and what Canada's been trying to slowly roll out as far as innovations, I think that it's going to be a major conversation for this year. And we might even be looking at having a compliance expert on our show in the coming months. So we'll be able to kind of talk through that. And hopefully the listeners will find that interesting. Did you have any conversation or any thoughts on the real world assets tokenization there, Jas, just before we wind down here?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned about basically similar to copycat tokens, like how does a person know whether they're buying into the right thing? It's similar to like how we solve the same problem in the crypto world, right? Like you have people on the website, you have the CA there, everywhere you have the CA there. Then Solana has blinks, so you're buying into the right asset, but it's pointed through Web 2. So the Web 2 points to the right asset on Web 3. The thing is, there are protocols such as ICP, which are decentralizing the entire stack of internet itself. So they're going to make the front end decentralized as well. So in that case, it's super secure. And you don't need anybody technically to accredit whether the RW exists or something like that, because when you're tokenizing something, it's at the end. Before this, everything has happened already. You gotten the approval for the mine, you've gotten everything done. People are going to buy the token if the liquidity exists for that token. So what we need to focus on is that we need to find buyers for the asset that we're trying to sell. So if we're tokenizing a mine, we need to get the people who usually invest into mines, get them USDC, and then put it into this RW exchange that Nations First has. So I would argue the major problem is getting the liquidity here, not getting compliant, because
I like it.
People, yeah, exactly. That's what
my sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you do a lot of the hard work up front, essentially, is what you're saying, and you do all the legwork, and you make sure everything's verified, and you have the right compliance approvals. Everything's done before you get to that step of tokenizing it. And like you say, with our NFT projects and everything, we're always looking for whether they have their founders on the website, whether we can verify the address to connect. And I like that idea of kind of Web 2 pointing to Web 3. And so you've done all of the stuff that you would typically do for this organization, and then the tokenization is kind of a final step that's just kind of adding a new layer of kind of authentic accountability and transparency, and making sure that people actually have this opportunity to buy into it. And even when it comes to finding the liquidity, like you say, going to the current people who are investing in mines and minerals and saying, hey, we've got this new digital asset, we've got this new token option, and then just kind of getting them on chain essentially, and then having that opportunity, that would be kind of the no-brainer, as well as the actual community that's impacted, right? And letting them know you've got now first access to an investment vehicle, which would have never been possible in Web 2 or the traditional kind of setup, right? Where you had to have access to a brokerage or whatever the case might be to actually invest in any of these public companies if they're public, and now you've got this whole tokenization option that is available to anybody and everybody who can afford it. You don't need any special approval or, access at your bank or whatever the case might be. So that's the revolution for sure. So awesome. Definitely agree, Jas, and that makes sense. Brown Eagle, Jas, I really appreciate you joining me here for this discussion, and I think we'll continue to keep tabs on the two projects. So the websites are nationsfirst.io and Sarah Blow, which is SARABLOH.ca. So sarahblow.ca and nationsfirst.io. Definitely go check them out. I think that AI education platform is a really awesome tool for everybody, and the fact that it's free to Indigenous people, Indigenous Canadians, is amazing. So kudos to you, Jas, and awesome Brown Eagle for putting this on my radar, and I'll definitely be mentioning it when I'm out and about, just talking with people about onboarding and giving out a resource for people, especially Indigenous people, but all people around Canada. And we're working here in Manitoba on a new group called On-Chain Manitoba. It's an IRL nonprofit that is focused exclusively on education and promotion of the technology and really advancing the technology here locally in Manitoba. So I think we're all on the same page and we're all kind of marching in the same direction. So just really exciting. And thank you again for joining. Brown Eagle, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Thanks for having us. And please follow me at Brown Eagle North on X. I do a lot of education on there also. Please get into the program, get into the AI course. And thanks for having us, and really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Brown Eagle. Jas, any final thoughts before we wind down?
No, all good. It's been a pleasure discussing. This is one of my first podcasts. I don't usually do them, but it's needed to do the educational bit.
Nice.
And making getting the right education to the right people, especially in Canada, giving back. That's what it is.
I like it.
So,
that's what we can do.
That's
and he's being really modest. Like, he's a huge contributor in this space too. Like, he's traveling all over the world. He's meeting world leaders, and he's really getting the Indigenous people. Like, he's giving us an alley-oop, right? And we need to be able to fulfill that, right? So we got this guy traveling all over the world, giving us big shout out. So he's been really modest. He's a real
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you, Brown Eagle, for adding that, and thank you, Jas, for doing that work. And I learned that you were a CTO in Dubai. That's pretty epic, man. I'm sure that was quite an interesting job for you. And I'm also kind of in the insurance space tangentially as well. So maybe we'll chat about that another time. But really grateful, and really important work that you're doing. So thank you again for putting it on my radar. And now we've shared it with the entire audience. I hope that the audience has found value in this. And if you are interested, as Brown Eagle said, you can reach out to him on X. You can always reach out to us at Web3 Warriors, and we can put you in contact with any of our guests, including Brown Eagle or Jas. And until next time, we'll catch you all in the metaverse. Peace out, everybody. Pew, pew.